Hello and welcome to this session on psychophysical parallelism. Psychophysical parallelism is a theory that mental and bodily experiences occur in tandem with each other but without any type of causal interaction. It denies the interaction between the body and the mind. In other words, the mind and the body are two independent phenomena but cannot be separated from one another, like two sides of a coin. The theory is a third possible alternative in considering the relation between mind and body, the others being interaction and one-sided action, for example, materialism. Nicholas Malebranche agreed that the mind and body were separated but did not agree with Descartes' explanation of how the two interacted. For Malebranche, God interceded if there was a need for the mind and body to interact. For example, if the body is injured, God is aware of the injury and makes the body feel pain. Likewise, if a person wants to move their hand, that is, to grasp an object with their fingers, that want is made aware to God and then God makes the person's hand move. In reality, the mind and body are not actually in contact with each other. It just seems that way because God is intervening. Occasionalism can be viewed as parallelism with divine intervention, so to speak, because if God did not mediate between the mind and body, there would be no interaction between the two. According to Baruch Spinoza, as explicated in his work Ethics, the two attributes of God of which we have cognizance, namely thought and extension, are not causally related. Rather, they are two different ways of comprehending one and the same reality. Thus, the human body has a corresponding idea, which is a human mind or soul. Whatever happens in the body always occurs in tandem with contents of the mind. Since everything that exists is a modus of God, Spinoza's concept represents a monist account of parallelism, contrary to Leibniz's pluralist version. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz concluded that the world was made up of an infinite number of life units called monads. A monad is similar to a living atom, and monads are all active and functioning. As there is naturally a hierarchy in nature, monads vary in degrees of intelligence. Some are more specialized and are more capable of having clearer and more distinctive thoughts, opposed to monads that are simpler in structure. Next to God, humans possess the monads that are able to exhibit the highest level of comprehensive thinking. However, humans possess many types of monads, varying from very simple to very complex forms, which explains why the ideas we experience at times differ in clarity. Monads, according to Leibniz, can never be influenced by anything outside of themselves. Therefore, the only way that they can change is by internal development, or more specifically, by actualizing their potential. He believed that monads never influence each other. It just seems like they do. Whenever we perceive a monad to be the cause of something, other monads are created in such a way as to seem like they are affecting the other. According to Leibniz, the entire universe was created by God to be in a pre-established harmony. So, nothing in the universe actually influences anything else. Looking at psychophysical parallelism in that way, we could imagine the mind and body as two identical clocks. The clocks will always be in agreement because of the pre-existing harmony between them, but will never interact. And like the two clocks, no interaction or causation among the monads that make up the mind and body is necessary because they are already synchronized. However, recent commentary on Leibniz casts doubt on the idea that in the later years of the monadology, Leibniz recognized two distinct categories of mind, that is, psycho and physical. In Leibniz's philosophy of the mind, he rejected this sort of Cartesian dualism. In previous years, Leibniz had talked of corporeal substances or bodily entities in addition to the dynamic units that become his monads. However, the monadology appears to make it clear, as does much of the late correspondence quoted by Garber, that Leibniz comes to see that monads are the only atoms of nature and body is merely an illusory appearance of aggregates of monads relating to our confused perceptions. Thus, contemporary Leibniz scholars tend to reject the label of psychophysical parallelism as a misreading. The origin of the misreading appears to come from monadology, in that it makes it clear that at least some of the preceding discussion is an attempt to explain how they appear to be souls and bodies progressing in harmony. Leibniz has previously made it clear that everything is monads and that monads progress in relation to each other according to God's laws without exchanging accidents in the scholastic sense. That is to say, there is no interaction in the sense of one thing passing something to another. Although Leibniz refers to harmony in the context of soul and body, the general principle of harmony has already been established for monads. This may seem strange, but there are reasons for thinking that it may presage the strange difference between the quantum and classical levels in modern physics. Leibniz talks quite extensively of body because in this aggregate form, monads show a different form of causation. It is intended to indicate that because of the general principle of progression of harmony of monads, which ultimately underlie body as well being souls, final and efficient causes also appear to harmonize. This might seem as akin to the correspondence principle in modern physics. If Leibniz's monadology is viewed in dualist terms, with both mental and physical ontological categories, and a psychophysical parallelism, then it has no counterpart in modern science. On the other hand, if the monadology is taken as a monistic form of dynamism, which appears to be the predominant view now, then there is no psychophysical parallelism in ontological terms, merely a technical difference in the patterns of dynamics of individuals and aggregates. In this case, Leibniz's system may be very much in tune with modern physics in a variety of respects. Psychophysical parallelism explained. Theory of psychophysical parallelism states that mental and physical experiences occur simultaneously and are not necessarily bound by any causal interaction. The theory was established in the early 19th century by a German philosopher, Gustav Theodor Fechner. While psychophysical parallelism definition might seem a bit unclear, the theory is very interesting and is one of the few philosophical theories which have been accepted by numerous scientists. To better understand Fechner's approach to mind-body problem, a little historical background would be helpful. In the middle of the 19th century, with a more and more rapid progression of scientific thought, many philosophers became interested in explaining the nature of mind and body interaction. This led to a famous materialism dispute as the opponents of metaphysical philosophy gained many supporters like Carl Vogert, Bochner and Mollescott. Materialistic approach to mind-body dichotomy was at that time seen as very radical, and some of its points still cause much controversy in the 21st century. Carl Vogert says that thoughts issue from the brain just as gall is produced by the liver or urine by the kidneys. Are our thoughts just like our bodily fluids, which are generated in a similar way as numbers in computer programs? Are we just very sophisticated machines? Gustav Fechner claimed to be able to give the solution to materialism debate. His theory, known as psychophysical parallelism, was first mentioned in 1820s, but it was not until 1860 that his approach became widely known thanks to his mature work, Elements of Psychophysics. There are many misconceptions about the meaning of psychophysical parallelism. Many people seem to confuse it with occasionalism, pre-established harmony and Cartesian doctrine of two non-interacting substances. It is true that psychophysical parallelism is partially congruent with Leibniz's theory of non-causal conformity of the soul and the organic body. However, a very important difference is that Fechner rejected any theological grounds for his theory, and therefore, even though psychophysical parallelism is a dualistic conception, by no means should it be confused with statements made either by Descartes or Leibniz. Fechner's theory states that while mental and physical states are not causally dependent, they are functionally dependent. What does it mean? It means that to every mental event, there is a corresponding brain event. It does not claim causal interaction, it does not deny it. It refrains from explaining the nature of mind and body. It is a very open and metaphysical free theory. By many, it is treated as a good and neutral foundation for more detailed explanations of the nature of mind and body problem, although the theory itself does not answer many questions. Leibniz and psychophysical parallelism. Yet another solution to the problem was presented by the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who rejected interactionism, occasionalism, and double aspect theory in favor of the view that mind and body exist in pre-established harmony. From this viewpoint, no interaction or causation is necessary because, like two clocks that keep the same time, the behavior of the two substances has been synchronized. However, pre-established harmony seems to deny the possibility of free will, though this was a general problem with Leibniz's philosophy. The problem is this: if substances are coordinated in pre-established harmony, how can this be compatible with free choice? Leibniz's answer is to point out that, regardless of the actual choice made, another choice is possible. So, although it might seem to be predetermined that you are reading this, it was logically possible that you might have done something else. This is not really a very convincing argument, for to accept that we have a choice, we would have to consider it a contingent truth that something happens. However, in organizing the pre-established harmony, God has chosen the best of all possible worlds. He has done this obviously because He is good, necessarily good that is. So, this then means that God must choose this world and everything is predetermined. Fundamental principles of psychophysical parallelism. A doctrine which states that the relation between mental processes on the one hand and physical, physiological or cerebral processes on the other is one merely of invariable concomitance. Each psychical change or psychical state, each psychosis, involves a corresponding neural change or neural state, neurosis, and vice versa. It denies the possibility of interaction between body and mind. At most, there can be a certain point-for-point correlation such that, given any process in the nervous system, a definite mental process is its invariable accomplishment. And given any particular process in consciousness, a corresponding brain state or neurosis will invariably be present. The fundamental principles of psychophysical parallelism are based on 1. Upon the fact that all psychical processes presuppose as their condition sine qua non processes of a physical character in the nervous organism. 2. Upon the principle of the conservation of energy. And 3. Upon the assumption that mind and matter are so utterly unlike and so utterly opposed in character that interaction between them is impossible. The psychological data upon which the theory rests we may in general grant. The modern science of psychophysics, aided by cerebral anatomy, cerebral physiology, and pathology, proves fairly conclusively that 1. Sensation and perception are conditioned by nervous processes in the brain and in the peripheral end organs of sense, depending in part at least upon external stimuli. 2. That memory and imagination likewise presuppose and are conditioned by cerebral connections and cerebral activity. And 3. That this is also to some extent the case with regard to intellectual operations and rational volition. We have so far little more than an experimental verification of two scholastic principles. 1. That sensation is an act of the composite organism, and 2. That intellectual activity is conditioned by phantasmata and indirectly by nervous processes. In truth, the data scarcely warrant us in going further than this. But the parallelist goes further. He asserts that intellectual operations have an exact physiological counterpart, which is more than he can prove. An image has doubtless its counterpart physiologically in the brain and physically in the outside world. The association of ideas is conditioned by, and in a sense is the psychical parallel of, the simultaneous or successive activity of different parts of the brain between which there is a physical and functional connection. And without such association of ideas, intellectual operations are impossible, so long that is, as soul and body are united in one being. but that intellectual operations, proper judgment, logical inference, general concepts, vast and far-reaching as they are in their significance, should have an exact counterpart in the activity of brain cells and their neurotic connections, is a hypothesis which the known facts of psychophysics fail to bear out and which is also inconceivable. How, for instance, can a general concept referring as it does to objective reality and embracing schematically in a single act many diverse notes bear any resemblance to the disturbance of nervous equilibrium that accompanies it, a disturbance which has no unity at all except that it occurs in different parts of the same brain more or less simultaneously? Or how can cerebral processes of a peculiarly unstable and almost haphazard type be, as they are alleged to be, the physiological counterpart of processes of reasoning, rigid, exact, logical, necessary? The assertion that all psychical processes have a physiological parallel is unwarranted, and scarcely less unwarranted is the assertion that all physiological processes have a psychic parallel. This latter point can be established only by appeal to the fiction of subliminal or subconscious consciousness. The existence of a threshold of consciousness, or in other words, of a limit of intensity which must be exceeded by the stimulus, as also by the nervous impulse which results before the latter can affect our consciousness, has been experimentally proved, and this fact cannot be accounted for by the parallelist except on the assumption that there are states of consciousness of which we are wholly unconscious. The second line of argument advanced in favor of parallelism is as follows. The principle of the conservation of energy supposes, we are told, that the universe is a closed mechanical system in which events, whether past or future, are calculable with the utmost precision given the knowledge of any one stage in the development of that universe and the laws according to which that development takes place. Such a system will brook no interference whatsoever from without. Hence, interaction between mind and matter is impossible, and parallelism is the only other alternative. This conclusion is quite illegitimate. Energy, as understood in the law which states that its sum is invariable, is strictly a non-directed quantity. Hence, even though this law is applicable to the lower phenomenon of animal life, as the experiments of Atwater and Hübner show, it by no means disproves the influence of consciousness, and will, for mind could still direct material energy and the law remain intact. This is admitted by Fechner, Mach, Boltzmann, Hoffler and von Hartmann, the latter being a determinist. Moreover, were the absolute independence of the physical world indeed a fact, the existence of consciousness would become an insoluble mystery, and the existence of a parallelism between it and the physical world a manifest contradiction. If there be no interaction between mind and matter, consciousness ceases to be an instrument whereby we modify our physical environment to suit our needs. Purposive striving, deliberation, choice, volition are thus rendered wholly unnecessary and irrelevant, and the belief that we can really do something to change things in the outside world and so promote both our comfort and those of our neighbor is a hopeless delusion. The practical utility of physical science also becomes illusory, for our bodies, which alone can give it effect, are declared to be merely automata with the working of which consciousness has nothing to do. Parallelism is useless here if interaction be abolished. Nay, more is incompatible with that very independence on account of which its existence is affirmed. Absolute independence and universal concomitance are contradictory. If there is concomitance directly or indirectly, as Mill said, there must be causal connection. That such a causal connection between mind and matter really exists, the consciousness of activity, purpose, will and responsibility directly testifies. And in the face of this testimony, to hark back to the Cartesian doctrine of radical opposition between body and soul, extension and thought, is futile and contrary to experience. Variations and developments of parallelism may in general be classed under two heads: conscious automatism, the theory of Huxley that the human body is a mere machine of which consciousness is the collateral product, a shadow or epiphenomenon which symbolically indicates, though it in no wise influence, the mechanical processes which underlie it. And the dual aspect theory, which maintains that psychical and physical phenomenon between which there is a point-for-point correspondence all along the line are but different aspects or expressions of the same common substance. Huxley's view emphasizes the material at the expense of mental, curiously oblivious of the fact that all we know of the physical universe and all the theories that we are able to formulate about it originate in and belong to consciousness. The dual aspect view improves upon this by giving to consciousness a value at any rate equal to that of mechanical movement. It is in fact a form of monism akin to that of Spinoza and involves most of the difficulties to which that system leads. But from our point of view, its chief error lies in its assertion that parallelism is the only relation which holds between the physical and the psychical, a relation which can be proved to hold so far as sensation and perception are concerned, but which, if further generalized to the exclusion of interaction, inevitably leads to contradiction. Let me summarize the session. Psychophysical parallelism means that mind and body are parallel. It is a form of dualism which denies any interaction between mind and body. Parallelism is a difficult position to hold since it does little to account for the fact that the brain and mind seem to regularly interact and that changes in one appear to affect the other. If the two are separate substances in a dualist view, then the idea that there is no causality between them, yet obvious changes in both simultaneously, seems counterintuitive. For this reason, it is not a commonly held belief, but merely a presentation of the third possibility, the others being two-way interaction, as in interactionism, and one-way interaction, as in most forms of physicalism. Although Leibniz was a monist, believing that only one true substance exists, he presented a form of parallelism in his theory of mind. Leibniz states that although they are of the same substance, the distinction between mind and body is a useful one for the purposes of understanding and explanation. He held that they are not causally related, but that they follow the same path which has been previously arranged by God. Leibniz's theory is known as pre-established harmony. Now you can try to answer the following questions. Explain the concept psychophysical parallelism. Briefly narrate the contributions of Gustav Theodor Fechner on psychophysical parallelism. Distinguish between the doctrine of psychophysical parallelism and interactionism. Compare Nicolas Malebranche's explanation of interactionism with Descartes' ideas. What are the attributes of God according to Baruch Spinoza as explicated in his work Ethics? How does Leibniz reach the conclusion that the world was made up of an infinite number of life units called monads? How does Gustav Theodor Fechner explain the psychophysical parallelism? Hope that you may go through the reference book for further understanding. An Introduction to the History of Psychology by B. R. Hergenhan, published in 2009 by Wadsworth St. J. Learning. Psychophysical Parallelism by L. Walker in the Catholic Encyclopedia in 2016. The functional view of the relation between the psychical and the physical in the Philosophical Review by Bowden in 1902. Analysis of the Sensation by Mack in 1897. Manual of Psychology by Stout in 1904. Psychical Research and Current Doctrines of Mind and Body by G. W. Balfour in Hibbert Journal 1910. Thank you for watching this program. We can meet again soon with another topic. Have a nice day.